Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down a really crucial first step in India's new criminal justice system, the exact moment a case officially begins in court.
So, have you ever really wondered how a criminal case actually gets off the ground in court? Because, before any trial, before a single piece of evidence is even looked at, a court has to make this really critical decision. It's not automatic at all. A judge has to consciously decide to even begin looking at a case.
Yeah, that initial step, it's called taking cognizance. And you can think of it as the official starting gun. It's that formal act that takes an investigation and turns it into an actual court proceeding. It's literally the moment a case officially comes to life in the judicial system.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with what cognizance really is, that starting gun of justice. Then we'll figure out who holds the keys, who has the power. We'll also touch on a pretty important high court exception, a key right this whole process creates for the accused, and then wrap up with what happens when these rules get broken.
All right, first up, the starting gun of justice. And this is so important because cognizance isn't just some piece of paperwork. Nope, it is the formal, conscious act that officially launches a case right into the court system.
Okay, so if there's a starting gun, who gets to fire it? Who exactly holds the keys to the courthouse doors? Let's get into it.
So under the new criminal code, there are basically three paths a magistrate can take to start a case. First, someone can file a formal complaint. Second, the police can wrap up their investigation and hand over their report. Or third, and this one's really interesting, the magistrate can act on their own information, something they might have heard or read about.
But here's the thing. Not all magistrates are created equal in this regard. There's a really clear hierarchy. A judicial magistrate first class, they always have this power. It's just part of the job. But a second-class magistrate, well, they need a specific green light, an authorization from the chief judicial magistrate before they can even think about taking cognizance of a case.
Okay, so that brings up a good question, right? If magistrates are the main gatekeepers, can a more senior court, say a court of session, just jump in and take a case directly?
Well, the general rule is a big, fat no. A court of session just doesn't do that. The whole system is built with a really clear structure. Cases don't just parachute into a higher court. They have to start with a magistrate who then commits them, or, passes them up the chain, to the higher court for the actual trial.
But of course, there are always exceptions. And this really shows that while the rule is firm, the law is also smart. It's not totally rigid. So, for example, in really sensitive defamation cases against high-ranking public officials, or say, when a new person is identified as an accused right in the middle of a trial, in those specific situations, the Court of Session is allowed to step in directly.
All right, now let's talk about something that's absolutely critical for fairness, a check and balance that's built right into the system. It's a right designed specifically to protect the accused when a judge is the one who kicks off a case on their own.
And you got to understand, this protection is super specific. It only gets triggered in one unique situation, when a magistrate takes cognizance suo moto. That's a fancy way of saying they do it on their own initiative. Maybe they read something in a newspaper or receive some information directly without any formal complaint or police report ever being filed.
So here's what the law says. If a magistrate starts a case all by themselves, the accused has to be told that they have a right to object. This is huge. It ensures that if you're the accused and you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, the person who started this case is also judging it, that feels biased, you have a clear legal path to get your case moved to a different, totally impartial judge.
Okay, this next part is a little bit in the weeds, but it's really important for understanding how cases get delegated. We're talking about making over versus marking a case. With making over, the Chief Judicial Magistrate, or CJM, actually takes cognizance first. They apply their own judicial mind to the case, and then they hand it off to another judge. But with marking, the CJM doesn't take cognizance. They just act like an administrator and assign the case from the get-go. And believe me, this isn't just legal jargon. It's a huge deal because it determines exactly whose judicial review officially kicks off the proceedings.
So, what happens when things go wrong? What if a magistrate who isn't actually authorized to take cognizance makes a mistake and does it anyway? Is the whole case just tossed out?
Well, let's look at the first scenario. If an unauthorized magistrate messes up and takes cognizance based on a formal complaint or a police report, the law is actually pretty forgiving. It's seen as a procedural hiccup, not a disaster. So the case can still move forward unless
the accused can prove that this specific error led to a real failure of justice. But, and this is a huge but, look at the contrast. If that very same unauthorized magistrate starts a case on their own initiative, suo motu, the law brings down the hammer. The entire proceeding is considered void, not just flawed, but completely invalid right from the very beginning. And this is what it's all about. This really gets to the heart of why these rules matter so much. The huge difference in consequences shows you just how seriously the law takes the potential for bias. A mistake based on a formal report? Okay, that's a procedural error. But an error when a judge acts as the accuser and the initiator? That's seen as a fundamental flaw that's so serious it invalidates the entire process.
So when you really think about it, understanding what cognizance is reveals something pretty profound. Justice doesn't just happen automatically. It's set in motion by a deliberate, conscious human decision. And that reminds us that the rules governing that very first step, well, they aren't just technicalities. They are the absolute bedrock of a fair trial for everyone involved.